Beneath the sand, beneath the ice, beneath the shattered stones of ancient empires, lies a truth darker than any legend. Kings who demanded loyalty beyond death. Queens who entered the afterlife surrounded not by silence, but by the bodies of those forced to follow them. Across Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, the Americas, archaeologists uncover the same horrifying pattern. In the moment a ruler died, dozens, sometimes hundreds, of human lives ended with them. This is not mythology, this is not symbolic, these are real tombs, real skeletons, and real crimes carved into the archaeology of our world. Welcome to Whispers of the World. If you enjoy real archaeology and ancient history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin. Our journey into the dark world of royal burials begins in ancient Mesopotamia, in the city of located in present-day southern Iraq. Around 4,600 years ago, this city was one of the most important centers of Sumerian civilization. It was a hub of trade, art, and religion, where kings and queens ruled with both political power and spiritual authority. Yet beneath the grandeur of its ziggurats and palaces lies a chilling truth. The lives of the powerful often came at the cost of many others. The discovery of Ur's royal tombs was one of the most extraordinary archaeological finds of the 20th century. Between 1922 and 1934, the British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the royal cemetery at uncovering a series of tombs that revealed not only the wealth of Sumerian royalty, but also the scale of human sacrifice practiced in the name of the afterlife. Woolley's work at is still considered one of the most meticulous and revealing studies of ancient funerary practices. The most famous of these tombs belong to Queen Puabi, a woman of immense status whose identity is confirmed by a cylinder seal found at her burial. The tomb itself was a small, carefully constructed chamber, lavishly adorned with gold, lapis lazuli, carnelian, and other precious materials. Within this chamber, Puabi's remains lay at the center, surrounded by a terrifying testament to her power. 74 attendants, men and women who had been killed to accompany her into the afterlife. Woolley's excavation revealed that these attendants were not merely placed in the tomb after dying of natural causes. Forensic analysis indicated that many of them had been poisoned or strangled, ensuring their deaths coincided with Puabi's burial. The precision of these killings suggests a highly organized ritual, with attendants and servants selected for their roles, possibly even trained for the final journey. Some archaeologists speculate that these individuals may have accepted their fate willingly, believing it was their sacred duty, while others were forcibly taken. The truth remains uncertain, but the evidence of deliberate, methodical killing is undeniable. Among the grave goods were golden helmets, ornate lyres, and ceremonial cups, which hint at the luxurious life Puabi led and the importance of ritual in her society. The lyres, some decorated with intricate inlays of shell and lapis lazuli, may have been played during funeral ceremonies, accompanying chants and lamentations for the deceased queen. Cups found in the tomb, some bearing traces of chemical residues, could have been used to administer poison or for ceremonial libations. Each object tells a story of wealth, status, and the intertwining of life and death in the Sumerian worldview. The arrangement of the tombs themselves also provides insight into Sumerian beliefs. The attendants were positioned deliberately around Puabi in a manner that suggests hierarchy even in death. Some lay near her head, others by her feet, perhaps reflecting their roles during her lifetime or the importance of their function in the afterlife. Woolley referred to these spaces as death pits, a term that conveys both the physical layout and the emotional impact of the discovery. Skeletal analysis has since confirmed the method of death for many of the attendants. Strangulation, blunt trauma, and in some cases chemical poisoning are evident. These findings indicate a highly ritualized process, not random acts of violence. The fact that so many people were sacrificed in a single tomb is a stark reminder of the extent to which Sumerian rulers wielded power over life and death. Interestingly, the presence of musical instruments, ceremonial cups, and luxury goods suggests that the attendants may have been intended to serve and entertain Puabi in the afterlife, continuing their roles as servants, musicians, and attendants beyond the realm of the living. This belief in an afterlife where social hierarchies persisted is a recurring theme across ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamia to Egypt and beyond. The more elaborate the tomb, the greater the demonstration of status, and the more lives were often taken to ensure the deceased's comfort and dominance in the next world. The excavation of Ur also uncovered other royal tombs with similar patterns of human sacrifice, reinforcing the idea that Puabi's tomb was not an anomaly. Kings and high-ranking officials were often accompanied by large numbers of attendants, sometimes including animals, reflecting a complex set of spiritual and social rules governing death. These burials provide rare insight into the intersection of religion, politics, and social hierarchy in early urban societies. Modern forensic techniques have added new layers of understanding to Woolley's initial discoveries. CT scans and chemical analyses of the remains allow researchers to identify causes of death, estimate the age and health of the victims, and reconstruct the rituals surrounding their sacrifice. DNA testing has also begun to reveal familial relationships among the attendants, suggesting that in some cases, entire family members may have been offered in service to the Queen. These advances transform Woolley's pioneering work into a comprehensive portrait of life and death in ancient Ur. The royal tombs of Ur, particularly Queen Puabi's burial, force us to confront the darker side of human history. They reveal a society where devotion to rulers could demand the ultimate price, where the line between honor and exploitation was blurred, and where the afterlife was secured through the ritualized death of others. Archaeologists like Woolley have given voice to the silent attendants, allowing us to witness a reality both horrifying and fascinating, a reality grounded in meticulous excavation and scientific analysis. By examining these tombs, we gain not only a glimpse into Sumerian beliefs and practices, but also a deeper understanding of the human desire to control death, to achieve immortality, and to demonstrate power in life and beyond. The sacrifices at Ur are a sobering reminder that for some rulers, glory in the afterlife was built on the suffering and obedience of many, a practice that echoes in various forms across time and civilizations. From the heart of Mesopotamia, our journey now takes us to the banks of the Nile in ancient Egypt, to a site that reveals one of the earliest and most chilling practices of human sacrifice in royal burials, Abydos. located in Upper Egypt, Abydos was considered one of the most sacred cities of ancient Egypt, long revered as a cult center for Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Here, the interplay of power, death, and devotion reached a terrifying apex. Archaeological excavations at Abydos have revealed that early pharaohs did not journey to the afterlife alone. Alongside them, dozens of attendants, servants, and possibly even family members were buried, their lives taken deliberately to serve their ruler in eternity. The practice is dated to the early dynastic period, around 3000 BCE, a time when Egypt was coalescing into one kingdom and pharaohs were asserting both political and divine authority over the land. The excavations at Abydos were primarily led by David O'Connor, an eminent Egyptologist whose meticulous studies have uncovered dozens of tombs containing evidence of retainer sacrifices. These tombs were smaller chambers adjacent to the main burial, often containing carefully arranged skeletons of men, women, and, in some cases, children. Each skeleton tells a grim story: strangulation marks on the cervical vertebrae, evidence of blunt force trauma, and sometimes cuts consistent with ritual execution. The precision and consistency suggest that these deaths were not haphazard or violent outbursts, but highly organized, state-sanctioned rituals. The burials reveal more than the method of death. They illuminate the social hierarchy of early Egypt. Attendants were positioned deliberately around their pharaoh, with their proximity likely reflecting their status or role during life. Some may have been elite servants, others skilled craftsmen, musicians, or even guards who had served the king faithfully. In essence, their social function continued beyond death, cementing the pharaoh's power and reflecting the Egyptian belief in a structured afterlife where every role must be fulfilled to maintain cosmic order. What is particularly striking about Abydos is the evidence of controlled killing. Skeletal analysis indicates strangulation as the primary method, sometimes in combination with other forms of trauma. This points to a ritualized approach rather than spontaneous execution. Victims were likely drugged or restrained, following a ceremonial process designed to honor both the pharaoh and the gods. Inscriptions and funerary texts from the period reinforce this interpretation, describing the afterlife as a continuation of the earthly realm, where the king's needs must be met by his attendants. The context of Abydos as a sacred site adds another layer of meaning. The city was closely associated with Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, and the rituals performed here were not merely practical, they were deeply spiritual. Sacrifices were believed to ensure the pharaoh's successful journey into the afterlife, protect the living kingdom from disorder, and maintain harmony between the mortal world and the divine. The human cost, though immense, was perceived as necessary for the balance of both cosmic and societal order. Interestingly, some burials at Abydos suggest the involvement of ceremonial instruments. Small pottery vessels, jewelry, and occasionally musical implements were found alongside human remains. These artifacts hint at rituals performed at the moment of sacrifice, perhaps chants, hymns, or music intended to guide the attendant spirits into service. Archaeologists theorize that such ceremonies were designed not only to honor the dead, but also to sanctify the act of killing, transforming a violent death into a sacred duty. Comparisons with other contemporary sites show that Abydos was not an isolated example. Across early dynastic Egypt, retainer sacrifices appear to have been a relatively common practice for elite burials. However, Abydos stands out due to the scale and preservation of the remains. Dozens of attendants per pharaoh indicate that these rituals were integral to royal funerary customs, and that the pharaoh's status demanded elaborate arrangements. Forensic studies have provided additional insights. Examination of skeletal remains reveals patterns that suggest victims were often young and physically capable, likely selected for their ability to serve in the afterlife. Evidence of repeated blows or strangle marks indicates that death was swift but deliberate. Chemical analysis of some remains even hints at the possible use of sedatives or poisons, though much remains speculative. What is clear, however, is that these were ceremonial deaths, carefully orchestrated to honour religious and social imperatives. The psychological and social implications of Abydos's retainer sacrifices are profound. These burials reveal a society where the boundary between devotion and exploitation was blurred, where social hierarchies extended into death, and where the ruler's afterlife was inseparable from the obedience and ultimate demise of their subjects. For the living, such practices reinforced loyalty through fear and awe. For the dead, it ensured their place in a cosmic order that prioritized the king above all else. Archaeologists continue to debate the motivations behind retainer sacrifices. Were attendants willing participants, believing in sacred duty and spiritual reward? Or were they victims of coercion, forced into death by the authority of the pharaoh? Likely, both scenarios coexisted, reflecting the complex interplay of belief, fear, and power in early Egyptian society. In either case, the human cost remains undeniable. Abydos also sheds light on the broader philosophy of death in ancient Egypt. The practice of sacrificing attendants emphasizes the belief that life continued beyond the grave, and that material and social comforts in the afterlife were inseparable from one's earthly status. Just as the pharaoh ruled over Egypt, he or she would command the loyalty of attendants in the next world, maintaining hierarchy, service, and devotion for eternity. In examining these tombs, we are confronted with the stark reality of ritualized human sacrifice, a practice that combined devotion, religious belief, and the unyielding assertion of power. The archaeological record at Abydos allows us to piece together a society in which the afterlife was carefully constructed and the lives of many were offered to ensure the pharaoh's immortality. By understanding Abydos, we gain insight not only into the mechanics of ancient Egyptian funerary practice, but also into the values, fears, and beliefs that shaped one of the earliest civilizations on Earth. The attendants of Abydos, though long dead, continue to speak through their remains, revealing a world where devotion could demand the ultimate price, and where the pursuit of eternal life cast a long, dark shadow over the living. As we leave Abydos, the echoes of these ancient sacrifices remind us that across time and geography, the fear of death and the desire for immortality have driven humans to extraordinary and often horrifying measures. In the chapters that follow, we will journey further east to China, exploring the Shang Dynasty's ritual burials, and see how similar practices of human sacrifice emerged in completely different cultures, united by the same quest for power, reverence, and eternal life. Our journey now takes us eastward to the heart of ancient China, where the Shang Dynasty, circa 1600 to 1046 BCE, established one of the earliest literate civilizations in the world. Centered in the city of Anyang in Henan province, the Shang Dynasty is renowned for its advancements in bronze work, writing, and complex urban organization. Yet, alongside these achievements lies a darker aspect of Shang society: mass human sacrifice, particularly in royal burials, a practice that demonstrates the absolute power of the kings and their spiritual beliefs. Archaeological excavations in Anyang, led by scholars such as Guangming Liu and Xiaoneng Yang, have revealed extensive evidence of sacrificial pits surrounding royal tombs. Unlike the relatively small-scale retainer sacrifices in Mesopotamia or Egypt, the Shang dynasty's burial practices involved hundreds of human victims, often war captives or enslaved servants who were killed to accompany kings and queens into the afterlife. These pits, carefully arranged near the tombs, illustrate the ritual precision and scale of human offerings in early China. The sacrificial pits were discovered in stratified layers containing both male and female skeletons, sometimes in fetal positions, sometimes laid out as if in life. Analysis of the remains indicates multiple methods of death: blunt force trauma, stabbing, and sometimes live burial, where individuals were interred while still conscious, reflecting a chilling adherence to ritual. These practices were not acts of random cruelty. They were highly structured ceremonies, orchestrated to ensure that the king would be surrounded by loyal subjects and attendants in the afterlife. The most famous of these tombs is that of King Wu Ding, one of the most powerful Shang rulers. Excavations revealed not only human remains, but also vast quantities of bronze ritual vessels, jade ornaments, and chariot fittings, all placed to accompany the king in death. Among the human sacrifices were men and women who may have served as warriors, servants, or ritual participants during the king's life. The combination of material wealth and human offerings underscores the Shang belief that social and spiritual order extended beyond death. Evidence suggests that these sacrifices were deeply tied to Shang religious practices and ancestor worship. Oracle bones, the earliest known form of Chinese writing, often include records of divinations concerning sacrifices, including questions about the timing, method, and selection of victims. The oracle bones show that human sacrifice was not only accepted, but institutionalized. The king had the divine authority to decide who would live and who would die to ensure cosmic harmony and divine favor. The arrangement of victims within the pits also reflects ritual hierarchy. Some skeletons appear to have been positioned closest to the tomb chamber, possibly indicating their importance or their role in the royal household. Others were placed in outer layers, suggesting differing levels of status even in death. This deliberate structuring highlights the Shang worldview. Life and death were organized hierarchically, and the afterlife mirrored the social structures of the living. Skeletal analysis further reveals the demographics of the victims. Many were young adults, physically capable, suggesting that strength and vitality were valued for the afterlife, possibly to serve the king or perform tasks in eternity. Signs of trauma, including repeated blows to the skull or sharp force marks on the vertebrae, indicate that death was deliberate, ritualized, and swift. Some remains also show evidence of restraint, suggesting that the victims were bound before being killed. The scale of the sacrifices is particularly notable. In certain pits, archaeologists have found over 100 individuals buried simultaneously. Such numbers reflect the immense social and political power of the Shang rulers, who could command the lives of so many, and the cultural acceptance of human sacrifice as a necessary component of royal funerary practice. These large-scale rituals likely serve both spiritual and political purposes, honouring ancestors, appeasing deities, and demonstrating the king's absolute authority over life and death. Interestingly, the Shang sacrifices also included animals. Horses, dogs, and other livestock were buried alongside humans, indicating a belief in the interconnectedness of human and animal roles in the afterlife. The presence of animals, along with chariots and weapons, suggests that the king's afterlife was envisioned as an extension of his earthly power, complete with transportation, servants, and even companions in the form of animals. Archaeologists have also examined the chemical composition of the bones and the surrounding soil. Traces of red ochre and other pigments indicate that the ritual was ceremonially elaborate, likely involving symbolic colouring or marking of victims to signify their sacred role. Some scholars speculate that ceremonial chants or music accompanied the killings, echoing practices found in other cultures, though direct evidence is rare. The Shang sacrificial pits offer insight into the broader philosophy of death in early Chinese society. Unlike Egyptian tombs, where attendants often served in domestic or entertainment capacities, the Shang sacrifices appear more militarized, reflecting the dynasty's constant focus on warfare, political control, and divine sanction. Yet the underlying principle is similar. The king's afterlife required human devotion and obedience, even if it meant taking the lives of the living. Modern forensic methods have deepened our understanding of these ancient practices. CT scans, DNA testing, and isotopic analysis allow researchers to identify familial relationships, geographic origins, and even nutritional histories of the victims. Such analysis reveals that some individuals may have been captured from distant regions, reflecting both the political reach of the Shang and the integration of conquest into ritual practice. These scientific methods transform what was once seen as legend into incontrovertible historical fact. Mass human sacrifice was a deliberate, institutionalized aspect of Shang royal burials. The Shang sacrifices also illustrate the connection between death, ritual, and statecraft. Human offerings reinforced the king's divine mandate, communicated his power to subjects, and maintained the social hierarchy in both life and death. By controlling who lived and died, the Shang rulers shaped the spiritual landscape of their society, ensuring that obedience extended beyond the mortal plane. As we examine these pits today, thousands of years later, the victim's silence is a stark reminder of the human cost of royal ambition. Archaeology allows us to reconstruct not only the methods of sacrifice, but also the belief systems and societal structures that made such practices possible. It is a sobering reflection on how deeply cultural and religious beliefs can intertwine with power, leading to rituals that are at once ceremonial, political, and deadly. As we continue our journey through the dark practices of royal burials, we turn once more to the Shang Dynasty of ancient China, focusing on one of its most remarkable figures, Lady Fu Hao. She was not only a queen but also a military leader, priestess, and high-ranking consort to King Wu Ding, reigning around 1200 BCE. Her tomb, discovered at Anyang in Henan province, stands out as one of the best preserved and most illuminating examples of Shang funerary practices, offering a chilling yet fascinating window into the world of ritual human sacrifice. The tomb was unearthed in 1976 by archaeologist Xu Sheng and his team, revealing an astonishingly intact burial chamber. Unlike many tombs of the period that had been looted or destroyed over millennia, Fu Hao's tomb retained its layout, grave goods, and even the remains of human sacrifices. The discovery is considered one of the greatest archaeological finds in Chinese history, providing unprecedented insight into Shang beliefs about life, death, and the afterlife. At the center of the tomb lay Lady Fu Hao herself, buried in a coffin adorned with jade, bronze ornaments, and lacquered wooden panels. Surrounding her were 16 human sacrifices, carefully arranged around the burial chamber. These individuals were a mix of men and women, chosen for their roles as attendants, guards, or ritual participants. Forensic evidence indicates that some were killed before burial by stabbing or blunt trauma, while others may have been buried alive, reflecting the diversity and ritual precision of Shang's sacrificial practices. The human victims were not alone. Archaeologists found 36 dog remains, suggesting that even animals were considered essential companions in the afterlife. These dogs, likely trained or specially selected, were sacrificed to serve as protectors, hunters, or spiritual guardians for the queen. The inclusion of animals alongside humans highlights the Shang belief that the afterlife mirrored the earthly realm, requiring both human and animal attendants to maintain the status and comfort of the elite. One of the most striking features of Fu Hao's tomb is the sheer quantity of grave goods. Over 1,600 bronze objects, including ritual vessels, weapons, bells, and ceremonial axes, were discovered. Additionally, jade ornaments, ivory carvings, and pottery were meticulously arranged throughout the chamber. These objects were not merely decorative, they were intended to equip Fu Hao for her journey into the afterlife, providing her with the tools, weapons, and symbols of authority she would need to maintain her power beyond death. The arrangement of human sacrifices and artifacts suggests careful planning and ritual significance. Some skeletons were positioned near the queen's head, others at her feet, and still others along the sides of the chamber, possibly indicating their hierarchical importance or specific roles in the afterlife. The alignment also reflects the Shang understanding of cosmology and ritual space, where the positioning of bodies and objects was believed to influence spiritual efficacy and protection. Analysis of the human remains reveals fascinating details about the victims. Skeletal studies show that many were young and healthy, with strong bones and evidence of physical training or labour. Signs of trauma, including cuts on the neck, blunt force marks, and punctures consistent with ceremonial execution, indicate that these deaths were intentional, controlled, and ritualized. Some individuals may have been war captives or servants, chosen for their obedience or symbolic value. In either case, their deaths served a dual purpose: to honor the queen and to reinforce the spiritual and social order dictated by the Shang elite. In addition to human and animal sacrifices, the tomb contained evidence of ritual feasting and offerings. Ceramic vessels, some with traces of food or drink, suggest that the burial ceremony included ceremonial meals, possibly performed in the presence of attendants before their deaths. These feasts may have symbolically nourished the queen and her companions for the journey ahead, a practice mirrored in other ancient civilizations where food and drink accompanied the deceased into the afterlife. Lady Fu Hao herself was a remarkable figure. Historical records, including inscriptions on oracle bones, confirm her roles as military commander and high priestess. She led armies into battle and conducted religious ceremonies, demonstrating both martial and spiritual authority. The scale of her tomb and the elaborate sacrificial rituals reflect her extraordinary status. She was not merely a consort, but a ruler in her own right, commanding loyalty and obedience even in death. The tomb also provides insight into the Shang Dynasty's philosophy of death and the afterlife. Human and animal sacrifices were intended to create a fully functional afterlife for the deceased, ensuring that the queen's needs were met in eternity. Weapons, musical instruments, ceremonial vessels, and attendants all point to a belief system in which the spiritual world was an extension of earthly hierarchies, requiring careful preparation and ritual precision. The more elaborate the tomb, the greater the display of power, and the more lives were taken to ensure that the deceased remained dominant in the afterlife. Modern forensic studies have added layers of understanding to Fu Hao's tomb. CT scans, DNA analysis, and isotopic studies allow researchers to reconstruct familial ties, geographic origins, and even nutritional history of the human sacrifices. Chemical residues on some bones suggest the possible use of sedatives or other substances, indicating that the rituals may have included controlled methods of death. These scientific methods transform the tomb from a static archaeological site into a dynamic story of human belief, devotion, and sacrifice. Lady Fu Hao's tomb also sheds light on broader societal structures. The sacrifices illustrate the absolute power of Shang rulers, who could command life and death with little opposition. They also reveal the societal acceptance of ritualized killing tied to religious beliefs, ancestor worship, and political control. Human sacrifice was a tool of both spiritual and social order, reinforcing the king or queen's authority while maintaining the hierarchy of the living and the dead. The preservation of Fu Hao's tomb allows us to witness a world in which devotion, fear, and power intersected in the most intimate and terrifying ways. It reminds us that ancient societies often viewed death not as an end, but as a continuation of social, spiritual, and political obligations. Attendants, guards, and animals were all part of a carefully orchestrated journey into eternity, demonstrating the extremes to which rulers went to secure immortality and eternal influence. As we leave the tomb of Lady Fu Hao, we are confronted by the human cost of power and the complexity of ancient ritual. Her burial, with its human sacrifices, animals, and wealth, encapsulates the dual nature of Shang society, magnificent in its artistry and organization, yet harrowing in its demand for obedience unto death. The tomb stands as a testament to human devotion, fear, and the enduring quest for immortality, revealing the stark realities of life and death in one of China's earliest civilizations. Our journey now moves northward, to the windswept steppes of Siberia, home to the Scythian nomads, a confederation of tribes renowned for their horsemanship, warfare, and elaborate burial practices. Flourishing from roughly the 8th to the 3rd century BCE, the Scythians left behind remarkable evidence of their society, including royal kurgans, or burial mounds, that provide a chilling glimpse into their practices of human and animal sacrifice. Unlike the tombs of Mesopotamia or China, the Scythian burials were often preserved by permafrost, earning them the name frozen tombs. The Scythians were a warrior society, highly mobile and deeply tied to the land. Yet even in this harsh environment, social hierarchy was paramount, and the dead were honoured in a manner that reflected both power and spiritual belief. Archaeologists from the Russian Academy of Sciences have excavated numerous kurgans in the Altai Mountains, revealing that Scythian chieftains were not only buried with their weapons, horses and treasures, but also with human attendants sacrificed to accompany them into the afterlife. Perhaps the most famous of these tombs is the Ice Maiden's Kurgan, though multiple sites, including the Pazyryk burials, have yielded similar evidence. Within these frozen tombs, archaeologists discovered men and women laid out in ceremonial positions, often dressed in elaborate clothing and adorned with jewellery, alongside horses, dogs and other animals. Some humans were buried alive or strangled, while others show evidence of blunt force trauma, confirming their deliberate deaths. These sacrifices reflect the Scythian belief that the chieftain required loyal companions to maintain status, power, and protection in the afterlife. The scale of Scythian human sacrifice is staggering. In certain royal burials, archaeologists have found upwards of 20 attendants, each positioned to serve a distinct role. Horses were often sacrificed as well, suggesting that mobility and wealth were crucial elements of the afterlife. The careful placement of the bodies, both human and animal, indicates a ritualized procedure designed to preserve hierarchy and status beyond death. The Pazyryk burials, remarkably preserved by ice, provide extraordinary detail about these rituals. Archaeologists discovered tattooed mummies, intricate clothing made from felt and leather, and chariots or sledges placed alongside the deceased. The attendants' bodies show signs of ceremonial killing, sometimes accompanied by grave goods, indicating that they were honoured in their deaths even as they were sacrificed. The frozen environment has preserved hair, skin, and even internal organs in some cases, allowing forensic scientists to study not only how these individuals lived, but how they died. Evidence suggests that the sacrifices were deeply symbolic. Horses, for instance, were often buried as companions to the chieftain, representing strength, mobility, and status. Dogs may have served as protectors, while human attendants were assigned duties that mirrored their roles in life: warriors, servants, or ritual participants. In essence, the Scythian afterlife was imagined as an extension of earthly life, where hierarchy, duty, and loyalty continued beyond death. Archaeologists have also noted signs of ceremonial adornment among the sacrificed individuals. Jewellery, patterned clothing, and even pigments were applied to bodies before burial, suggesting that the rituals were not merely functional but imbued with spiritual significance. Some graves include food and drink, likely intended to nourish the deceased and their companions on the journey into the afterlife. The combination of sacrifice, ritual, and wealth reflects a worldview in which life, death, and eternity were intertwined. The human victims themselves provide important insights. Skeletal studies show that many were young adults in peak physical condition, often displaying evidence of robust musculature and labour-intensive lifestyles. Trauma marks on bones, particularly around the skull and neck, indicate ritualized killing rather than accidental death. In some cases, bindings on wrists or ankles suggest that the victims were restrained, ensuring their obedience in death as they had been in life. The frozen tombs also reveal the cosmology and spiritual beliefs of the Scythians. Burials were aligned with celestial or geographic markers, reflecting connection between the king, the land, and the cosmos. Human and animal sacrifices were part of a larger ritual framework that sought to maintain harmony between the living and the dead, the earthly and the spiritual, and between human and animal realms. These practices were not mere displays of wealth or power. They were deeply spiritual acts believed to ensure the protection, authority, and continuity of the chieftain beyond death. The scale and elaboration of these burials underscore the immense power wielded by Scythian chieftains. Commanding the lives of both humans and animals, they orchestrated deaths that were both ritual and political, reinforcing authority, hierarchy, and devotion. These sacrifices were a clear demonstration of loyalty and obedience, signaling that the chieftain's influence extended even into the afterlife. Modern forensic methods have transformed our understanding of the frozen tombs. CT scans, isotopic analyses, and DNA testing allow researchers to reconstruct diets, origins, and family connections of both the chieftain and the sacrificed attendants. These techniques confirm that many victims were captured from distant regions, reflecting the Scythian network of influence and conquest. Chemical traces indicate possible sedation or ritual preparation, further emphasizing the ceremonial aspect of these sacrifices. The frozen tombs are a stark reminder of the universality of human sacrifice across cultures. From Mesopotamia to Egypt to China, and now the steppes of Siberia, rulers have historically demanded ultimate loyalty from those around them. The Scythians, though geographically distant and culturally distinct, share with other civilizations the belief that the elite's afterlife required obedience, service, and sometimes death. In reflecting on these practices, it is impossible to ignore the human cost. Men, women, and animals, all sacrificed to secure the status of a single ruler, reveal a world where devotion, fear, and power were inseparable. Yet, they also offer extraordinary insight into the ritual, social, and spiritual frameworks that governed ancient life. The frozen tombs preserve not only bodies but a worldview in which death was carefully orchestrated to reflect earthly hierarchies and spiritual beliefs. As we leave the frozen tombs of the Scythians, the echoes of this nomadic civilization remind us that the intertwining of life, death, and ritual was a global phenomenon. These practices demonstrate the lengths to which societies have historically gone to secure the afterlife for their rulers, demanding obedience, loyalty, and sacrifice from many. Our journey now takes us across the globe to Mesoamerica, to the heart of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, where the ancient Maya civilization thrived from roughly 250 to 900 CE during the Classic period. The Maya were renowned for their advanced astronomy, intricate calendar systems, monumental architecture, and complex religious beliefs. Yet among their most striking and chilling practices was the ritual sacrifice of humans, particularly at sacred sites such as the Cenote Sagrado, or Sacred Cenote, at Chichen Itza. The Cenote Sagrado is a natural sinkhole, a deep, water-filled chasm formed by the collapse of limestone bedrock. It was revered by the Maya as a portal to the underworld, the domain of Chak, the rain god, who was crucial to agricultural fertility and survival. The Maya believed that offerings to Chalk could influence the rains and, by extension, the life and prosperity of the community. Among these offerings were not only gold, jade and pottery, but also hundreds of human victims, often of noble or royal significance. Archaeological investigations of the sacred cenote were primarily conducted by Edward Thompson in the early 20th century. Thompson dredged the cenote, recovering a wealth of artifacts and human remains. These included skeletons, skulls, and fragmented bones, some showing evidence of trauma consistent with ritual killing, while others suggest that victims were thrown alive into the water, a terrifying plunge into the unknown. The evidence indicates that these sacrifices were highly ceremonial, performed to appease deities, ensure agricultural fertility, and maintain cosmic balance. The human remains recovered from the cenote reveal much about the victims. Skeletal analysis indicates a mix of adults and adolescents, both male and female. Forensic studies show signs of violent death, including broken limbs, cranial trauma, and occasionally cut marks, consistent with ritualized execution. Many of the victims were likely chosen for their social status, suggesting that the Maya believed that offering elites or warriors increased the potency of the sacrifice. This reflects a society in which religious devotion and social hierarchy were deeply intertwined. The artifacts recovered alongside the bodies also provide critical insight. Jewelry made of jade, shells, and obsidian was found, indicating that victims may have been adorned as part of the ritual. Ceremonial pottery, figurines, and gold objects were also cast into the cenote, sometimes accompanying human offerings. These materials not only enhanced the spiritual efficacy of the sacrifice, but also demonstrated the wealth and devotion of those performing the ritual, often the ruling elite. The sacred cenote was not merely a site of death, it was a center of religious spectacle and ceremonial practice. Maya priests likely oversaw the rituals, chanting invocations, playing instruments, and conducting elaborate ceremonies to ensure that the offerings reached Chak. The act of sacrifice was believed to maintain cosmic order, prevent drought, and guarantee the continued favor of the gods. By dedicating human life in this way, the Maya demonstrated a profound commitment to the spiritual and material well-being of their society. Interestingly, some studies suggest that victims may have been drugged or ritually prepared before being thrown into the cenote. Evidence of plant residues, possibly hallucinogenic or sedative, has been detected on certain bones and artifacts, suggesting that the Maya ritual experience involved both spiritual preparation and physical subjugation. These practices highlight the complexity of Maya ritual sacrifice, where death, devotion, and ceremony were inseparable. The social implications of the sacred cenote sacrifices are significant. By offering individuals of high status or warriors, the rulers reinforced their divine authority, signaling to the community that they maintain control not only in the political realm, but also in the spiritual world. Human sacrifice was thus both a religious obligation and a tool of governance, ensuring social cohesion through fear, respect, and ritual observance. Moreover, the scale of the cenote sacrifices underscores the Maya belief in interconnectedness between life, death, and nature. Water was a symbol of fertility and life, yet it also represented danger and death. By casting human lives into the cenote, the Maya sought to bridge the human and divine realms, offering life to sustain life in a ritual cycle of cosmic reciprocity. The cenote became a liminal space where the boundary between the living and the dead, the earthly and the divine, was blurred. Modern archaeological methods have provided further clarity. Submerged skeletal remains can now be analysed using 3D imaging, isotopic studies, and DNA analysis, allowing researchers to identify age, sex, and geographic origin. These studies reveal that some victims may have been from distant regions, possibly captives or tributaries, highlighting the political dimension of ritual sacrifice. Chemical analyses suggest exposure to ceremonial substances or toxins, supporting the theory that rituals involved careful preparation to maximize spiritual efficacy. The sacred cenote also connects to broader Maya funerary practices. While some sacrifices involved water offerings, others were buried in tombs, temples, or ceremonial platforms. Across these contexts, the principle remains the same. Human life was dedicated to divine service, particularly in the service of rulers and the maintenance of cosmic balance. Sacrifices were both a spiritual and social imperative, linking religious devotion with the consolidation of political power. As we reflect on the sacred cenote, we see a practice that, while terrifying to modern sensibilities, was deeply meaningful to the Maya. Human sacrifice was not random violence, but a ritualized act intended to sustain life, appease gods, and uphold social and spiritual hierarchies. The victims' lives were given to ensure the prosperity of the community and the authority of the ruling class, reflecting a worldview in which devotion, fear, and obedience were inseparable. From the jungles and lakes of Mesoamerica, we journey south to the arid coastal valleys of northern Peru, home to the Moche civilization, which flourished from roughly 100 CE to 700 CE. The Moche are renowned for their sophisticated ceramics, monumental adobe pyramids, intricate metalwork, and highly organized society. Among their most striking and chilling archaeological discoveries are the sacrifice chambers at Huaca de la Luna, a massive ceremonial complex that provides a window into the Moche's ritualized system of human sacrifice, often performed to honor elite rulers and maintain social and cosmic order. Huaca de la Luna, the smaller companion pyramid to the more famous Huaca del Sol, served primarily as a religious and ceremonial center. Excavations led by Santiago Uchida and his team revealed extensive evidence of ritual killings, particularly of warriors and attendants. These victims were often arranged in rows, demonstrating that sacrifice was highly structured and ceremonial, not arbitrary. The placement of bodies, as well as the evidence of wounds, shows that these killings were carried out with precision, likely following strict ritual protocols that underscored the authority of the ruling elite. The Moche practiced what is often referred to as throat-cutting sacrifice, a ritualized method designed to release blood, which was considered a potent offering to the gods. Many of the skeletons show cuts to the sternum or neck, evidence of careful execution intended to honor deities and elite leaders. This ritual was deeply tied to Moche cosmology, in which blood was a powerful conduit between the human and divine realms, essential for maintaining fertility, rain, and agricultural prosperity. The victims themselves were primarily young adult males, often warriors or captives from neighbouring regions. Skeletal analysis indicates that many were physically robust, capable of enduring the rigours of labour or warfare, suggesting that their selection was deliberate and symbolic. Some may have been chosen for their social status, reflecting a belief that offering high-ranking individuals enhanced the efficacy of the ritual. Forensic evidence of binding and restraint on several skeletons confirms that these sacrifices were not voluntary. The victims were deliberately prepared for ceremonial death. The ritual chambers at Huaca de la Luna were carefully constructed for the performance of these sacrifices. Large ceremonial plazas and platforms were arranged to allow priests, rulers, and participants to witness the events, reinforcing the social hierarchy and the authority of the elite. Frescoes and murals adorning the walls depict warriors, deities, and ritual scenes, suggesting that these ceremonies were both religious and performative, demonstrating power and devotion simultaneously. One of the most remarkable features of the Moche sacrifice chambers is the evidence of mass execution events. Archaeologists have found multiple layers of bodies, sometimes numbering in the dozens, buried in sequences that indicate repeated rituals over years or decades. These sacrifices were not isolated incidents, but part of a sustained tradition that reinforced the power of the elite, appeased the gods, and maintained cosmic balance. The repetition of such ceremonies also served to instill fear and obedience among the populace, linking ritual killing with social control. In addition to human victims, evidence suggests that the Moche included symbolic offerings in their sacrificial rituals. Ceramics, metal ornaments, and painted vessels were often buried alongside the dead, likely intended to accompany them or to appease the gods. Some frescoes depict the presentation of these offerings, highlighting the intricate integration of art, ritual, and power in Moche society. The combination of material goods and human life illustrates the profound significance of sacrifice, linking the earthly and spiritual realms. The forensic evidence provides further insight into the ritual itself. Many of the victims show cut marks on the chest, consistent with precise ceremonial methods intended to drain blood while maintaining a controlled execution. The bodies were carefully positioned, often laid out in rows facing a specific direction, suggesting cosmological alignment and ritual intent. Such practices highlight the Moche understanding of the afterlife and the necessity of ritualized death to maintain both spiritual and social order. The social and political dimensions of these sacrifices are striking. By orchestrating mass killings, the Moche elite demonstrated absolute authority, controlling life and death in a highly visible and ritualized manner. Sacrifices reinforced loyalty, instilled fear, and reminded the community of the divine mandate of rulers. The rituals also reflected the interdependence of religion and governance. Spiritual devotion validated political power, and the power of rulers ensured the continuation of sacred practices. Modern archaeological methods, including CT scans, DNA analysis, and isotopic studies, have illuminated the lives and deaths of the victims. Analyses reveal that many were local to the region, though some may have been captured in warfare, indicating that ritual sacrifice was intertwined with conflict, conquest, and social hierarchy. The chemical composition of bones and associated artifacts provides additional insight into ceremonial practices, suggesting the use of plant substances or pigments during rituals. These findings confirm that sacrifice was both spiritual and performative, designed to serve gods, rulers, and society. Huaca de la Luna also demonstrates the psychological and cultural significance of sacrifice. Witnessing the ritualized killing of warriors and attendants would have reinforced the authority of the ruling elite, while the careful preparation and ceremonial execution elevated the act beyond mere violence, transforming it into a sacred duty. Human sacrifice in this context became a tool to maintain social cohesion, communicate divine power, and link life with death in a cosmological framework. The Mocha sacrificial chambers also reveal the importance of blood as a sacred medium. Blood, life force, and vitality were central to Mocha cosmology, and the deliberate extraction of blood during sacrifice was a potent offering to the gods. This belief reflects a worldview in which human life was intertwined with divine favour, agricultural fertility, and the maintenance of cosmic balance. By offering blood and life, the Mochi ensured the continuation of their society and the authority of their rulers. As we leave Huaca de la Luna, we confront a civilization that, like others we have explored, intertwined power, devotion, and ritualized death in complex and sometimes horrifying ways. The Mocha demonstrate that the human desire to secure spiritual favor, assert authority, and maintain social order has driven societies across continents to the extreme of ritualized killing. Yet through the careful study of their remains, architecture, and artifacts, we gain profound insight into their worldview, beliefs, and social structures. From the northern coastal valleys of Peru, we now journey inland to the highlands, to the Wari civilization, which flourished from roughly 600 to 1100 CE. The Wari were a highly organized society, known for their urban planning, distinctive ceramics, and monumental architecture. Among their most revealing archaeological discoveries are the royal tombs, particularly the so-called Tomb of the Queens, which demonstrates that ritual human sacrifice was not only a practice associated with male rulers, but also with elite women in positions of power. Excavations at the Wari sites, led by archaeologists such as Milena Calderon, have uncovered several tombs containing multiple female attendants sacrificed to accompany queens in death. These burials provide a unique perspective on gender, hierarchy, and ritual in pre-Columbian societies. They illustrate that elite women were accorded the same spiritual and social significance as male rulers, commanding attendance and ritual offerings to ensure their authority extended into the afterlife. The Tomb of the Queens typically consists of a central burial chamber housing the queen, surrounded by secondary burials of attendants. The human sacrifices, usually women, were carefully arranged in positions that suggest specific roles in the afterlife. Some were placed at the head and feet of the queen, while others lined the sides of the chamber. This deliberate placement indicates that the attendants were intended to serve, protect, and honor the queen, mirroring the social hierarchy of life in the spiritual realm. Forensic analysis of the remains shows that the sacrificed women were generally young adults in their physical prime. Skeletal examinations reveal signs of trauma consistent with ritualized killing, blunt force injuries, stab wounds, and evidence of restraint, suggesting that the victims were bound before death. Some skeletons show healed injuries, indicating that the women may have been part of the elite household for years, trained in service or ritual roles before their ultimate sacrifice. The Wari also included grave goods in these burials, emphasizing the ceremonial nature of the sacrifice. Ceramics, textiles, jewelry, and ritual objects were placed alongside both the queen and her attendants. These offerings not only provided material support for the afterlife, but also reflected the status, wealth, and spiritual authority of the individuals involved. The combination of human sacrifice and elaborate grave goods underscores the belief that social hierarchy, devotion, and spiritual protection were inseparable in Wari culture. The context of the Tomb of the Queens suggests a highly organized ritual. The number of attendants varies, but some tombs include 10 or more women, each assigned a specific spatial arrangement. The careful layout implies that these ceremonies were not haphazard, but codified events, possibly overseen by priests or high-ranking officials who ensured that every aspect of the ritual conformed to tradition and religious law. Such precision indicates that the Wari viewed death as a continuation of social and political order, where even in the afterlife, hierarchy and duty persisted. Evidence also suggests that the Wari queens were central figures in both religious and political spheres. By commanding sacrifices, they asserted spiritual authority and reinforced the social structure of their society. Unlike the Moshe, where male rulers primarily orchestrated human sacrifice, the Wari demonstrate that elite women wielded similar power in life and death, capable of mobilizing devotion, loyalty, and ritual compliance. This highlights the complex interplay of gender, status, and religious belief in ancient Andean societies. Archaeologists have noted signs of ritual preparation for the attendants. Chemical analysis indicates exposure to ceremonial substances, and some textiles suggest that victims were adorned with garments marking their sacred status. These preparations would have elevated the sacrifice from mere execution to a religious and performative act, emphasizing the spiritual significance of the attendant's role in accompanying the queen. The inclusion of symbolic objects, ceramics, ritual implements, and jewelry reinforces the idea that death was a continuation of duty, service, and spiritual devotion. The Tomb of the Queens also provides insight into Wari cosmology. The arrangement of bodies, the orientation of the tomb, and the inclusion of grave goods reflect a belief that the afterlife was a structured extension of earthly society. Attendants, like the Queen, were expected to maintain social roles and provide spiritual service. Sacrifice was a means of ensuring that the Queen's authority and protection persisted beyond death, reinforcing both her power and the cohesion of the elite class. Modern forensic methods have deepened our understanding of these practices. CT scans, DNA analysis, and isotopic studies reveal the geographic origins, health, and familial relationships of both queens and attendants. These analyses show that some attendants may have been from distant regions, possibly captured or assigned for service, reflecting the integration of ritual sacrifice into the political and social framework of the Wari state. By combining archaeology with science, researchers can reconstruct not only the methods of death, but also the lived experiences, preparation, and spiritual context of the victims. The Tomb of the Queens demonstrates the universality of ritual sacrifice as a mechanism of power, devotion, and spiritual continuity. Across cultures and continents, rulers, whether male or female, relied on the lives of attendants, servants, or captives to assert authority in life and secure protection in death. In Wari society, elite women were no exception, commanding obedience, ritual service, and devotion even unto death, ensuring their dominance extended into eternity. Reflecting on these tombs, one cannot ignore the profound human cost. Young women selected for beauty, skill, or social status were sacrificed to uphold the spiritual and political order of the Wari state. Yet their deaths were embedded in a complex belief system that linked life, hierarchy, and cosmic order. Sacrifice was a tool of both devotion and control, ensuring that the social structure of life was mirrored in the afterlife. The Tomb of the Queens also underscores the variation in sacrificial practices globally. While some civilizations focused on male rulers and warriors, the Wari highlight that women could hold equivalent authority, commanding rituals that demanded human life to maintain cosmic and social order. These tombs reveal that ritualized killing was not merely an expression of male dominance, but a culturally sanctioned practice integral to elite authority, irrespective of gender. As we leave the highlands of Peru and the Tomb of the Queens, the echoes of these ancient ceremonies remind us that ritualized human sacrifice was a global phenomenon, deeply entwined with political power, spiritual belief, and societal hierarchy. Across continents and civilizations, from Mesopotamia to China, Siberia to Mesoamerica, and now the Andean highlands, human lives were offered to ensure cosmic balance, royal authority, and spiritual protection. As we continue our journey through the dark world of royal burials, we return to ancient China, this time to the Shang Dynasty, 1046 to 256 BCE, which succeeded the Shang and introduced new political, social, and ritual structures. While the Shang Dynasty is often celebrated for its advancements in philosophy, governance, and culture, its royal tombs reveal that human sacrifice continued to play a crucial role in funerary practices, particularly for high-ranking rulers and members of the elite. The royal tombs of the Shang Dynasty, particularly those discovered in Shanxi province, exhibit clear evidence of human and animal sacrifices accompanying the deceased. These tombs often contained elaborate burial chambers for kings, queens, and high officials, along with chariots, horses, and attendants strategically placed around the primary coffin. Archaeologists have found that victims were bound, positioned, and killed in highly controlled ways, reflecting both ritual precision and hierarchical order. One of the most well-documented Zhou royal tombs is that of Duke Jing of Zhou, excavated in the mid-20th century. Within the tomb complex, archaeologists discovered multiple human skeletons arranged around chariots and horses. These individuals were most likely attendants or retainers, intended to accompany the Duke into the afterlife and maintain his status and authority. Skeletal analysis indicates trauma consistent with ritual execution, including blunt force injuries, cut marks, and evidence of binding. Some victims may have been buried alive, reflecting the continuation of older sacrificial practices inherited from the Shang Dynasty. The inclusion of horses and chariots in these tombs is particularly significant. Horses were considered essential for travel and power in the afterlife, while chariots symbolized both military might and social status. The human sacrifices were carefully positioned around these items, suggesting that their role was to serve and protect the deceased ruler, ensuring that he retained the privileges and power of life in eternity. This spatial arrangement demonstrates the Zhou belief that the afterlife mirrored earthly society, requiring not only material wealth but also human service. Archaeological excavations have revealed the careful preparation of victims. Skeletal remains show signs of binding on the wrists and ankles, indicating that the individuals were restrained prior to execution. Cut marks and blunt force trauma suggest controlled methods of death, executed with precision rather than random violence. Some tombs also show evidence of ritualized adornment, such as jewelry or pigments, applied before death, emphasizing the ceremonial and sacred nature of the sacrifice. The number of human sacrifices in Zhou royal tombs varied, depending on the status of the deceased. High-ranking kings and queens could have dozens of attendants buried with them, while lower nobility might have only a few. This practice reflected the rigid social hierarchy of the Zhou dynasty, where authority, wealth, and devotion were intertwined. Sacrifice was both a demonstration of power and a spiritual necessity, reinforcing the ruler's divine mandate and ensuring the stability of society. Animal sacrifice was also prevalent. Horses, dogs, and occasionally cattle were included to provide transportation, protection, and companionship in the afterlife. These animals were often placed alongside humans in carefully arranged positions, reflecting a belief that both human and animal service were required to sustain the deceased ruler's authority and comfort. The combination of humans and animals underscores the Zhou understanding of the afterlife as a continuation of earthly hierarchy and function. The Zhou dynasty also marked a transition in ritual philosophy. While human sacrifice remained part of royal burials, there was a gradual movement towards symbolic offerings, such as figurines or clay representations of attendants, as the dynasty progressed. This shift likely reflected both ethical concerns and evolving religious beliefs. Yet in the early Zhou period, particularly during the reigns of powerful kings and nobles, actual human sacrifice was still a critical component of funerary practice, emphasizing the continuity of ritual from the Shang era. Forensic studies of the Zhou tombs have illuminated the experiences of the victims. Skeletal evidence indicates that many were young and physically capable, consistent with the selection of servants or retainers who could fulfill specific duties in life and death. Trauma patterns suggest ritual killing rather than accidental injury, and careful placement within the tomb indicates that the Zhou elite meticulously orchestrated these deaths to maintain both ceremonial propriety and social order. The presence of chariots and horses also provides insight into the technological and martial culture of the Zhou. Chariots were highly valued symbols of status and power, and burying attendants alongside them ensured that the deceased retained military and social authority in the afterlife. The inclusion of both humans and animals in these tombs reflects a belief that spiritual and worldly power were inseparable, and that proper ritual observance was essential to maintain cosmic balance. In addition to physical evidence, inscriptions and historical texts provide context for these practices. Ancient Zhou documents, including the Rites of Zhou, Zhou Li, describe funerary rituals in which attendants, guards, and animals were sacrificed to honor the dead and protect the living. These records, combined with archaeological findings, illustrate a society in which religion, governance, and mortality were deeply intertwined. Sacrifice was a means of reinforcing authority, ensuring obedience, and maintaining the social and cosmic order. The royal tombs of the Zhou dynasty demonstrate both continuity and evolution in Chinese funerary practices. While the Shang had perfected large-scale human sacrifice with elaborate tombs like Lady Fu Hao's, the Zhou adapted these traditions, incorporating chariots, horses, and more structured ceremonial methods. Over time, the reliance on human sacrifice declined, replaced increasingly by symbolic offerings and ritual paraphernalia, yet the underlying principles of hierarchy, devotion, and afterlife preparation remained central. Modern archaeological techniques, including CT scanning, isotopic analysis, and DNA testing, have revolutionized our understanding of these tombs. Scientists can now determine familial relationships, geographic origins, and even diet and health of both the rulers and their sacrificed attendants. Chemical analyses of bone and artifact residues further illuminate ritual practices, revealing substances used in ceremonial preparation or execution. These methods provide a multi-dimensional understanding of Zhou funerary culture, bridging the gap between ancient belief and modern science. Reflecting on the royal tombs of the Zhou dynasty, we see a civilization that balanced technological, philosophical, and administrative advancements with ritualized brutality. Human and animal sacrifices were not merely acts of cruelty, but integral components of a cosmological and political system, ensuring that rulers maintained authority and continuity in both the earthly and spiritual realms. The tombs preserve evidence of obedience, devotion, and hierarchy, reminding us that the human cost of power has been a recurring theme across civilizations. As we leave the Zhou tombs, we recognize the recurring patterns seen in Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, Siberia, Mesoamerica, and Peru. Human sacrifice was a global phenomenon, deeply embedded in the maintenance of royal authority, religious devotion, and the preparation for an afterlife that mirrored the hierarchy and function of life itself. Our journey now moves to South Asia, to the ancient civilization of the Indus Valley, which thrived from roughly 3,300 to 1,300 BCE, encompassing modern-day Pakistan and northwest India. Among its most prominent sites are Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Lothal, the latter located in Gujarat, India. While the Indus Valley civilization is renowned for its advanced urban planning, drainage systems, standardized weights, and trade networks, its burial practices have sparked debate among archaeologists, particularly concerning possible human sacrifice. Unlike the clearly ritualized killings of Mesopotamia, Egypt, or Mesoamerica, the evidence here is more enigmatic, leaving researchers cautious but intrigued. Lothal, primarily known for its dockyard and trade connections, has revealed several mass burials and skeletons exhibiting unusual characteristics. Archaeologists have discovered graves containing multiple individuals in cramped arrangements, some showing cut marks on skulls, decapitation, or missing cranial elements. These anomalies have raised questions. Were these the result of warfare, ritualized sacrifice, epidemic deaths, or social custom? The evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive, leading to ongoing debate among specialists. One of the key findings is the presence of grouped burials, Unlike typical single burials, these graves contain several individuals positioned together, sometimes with signs of violent trauma. Skeletal analysis shows evidence of perimortem injuries, including cuts, fractures, and possible restraints. While no definitive sacrifice chamber has been found, these unusual patterns suggest that some form of ritualized or ceremonial killing cannot be ruled out. Archaeologists such as R.S. Bisht and Gregory Possel have noted that the Indus Valley civilization's burials were generally modest and standardized. Most people were buried with minimal grave goods, and the absence of grandiose tombs contrasts sharply with the elaborate royal burials in Mesopotamia, China, and Peru. Yet the anomalies at Lothal, multiple individuals, evidence of trauma, and selective removal of body parts, have led some scholars to hypothesize that these may represent ritual killings for elite or spiritual purposes, possibly linked to trade, social hierarchy, or religious belief. Chemical and isotopic analyses have provided further insight. Some skeletons show signs of dietary differentiation, suggesting that victims may have come from distinct social groups, possibly slaves, captives, or marginalized individuals. This raises the possibility that sacrifices, if they occurred, were symbolically meaningful, offering lives to gods protecting elite interests or enforcing social cohesion. Yet, the lack of inscriptions or direct textual evidence leaves room for debate. Another puzzling aspect is the removal of skulls or cranial elements. At several Indus Valley sites, skulls were missing or detached from the bodies, a pattern reminiscent of ritual decapitation or ancestor veneration practices in other ancient cultures. While some scholars argue this may result from post-depositional disturbance or natural processes, others see parallels with known sacrificial or ceremonial customs elsewhere in the world, suggesting intentional ritual activity. The urban context of Lothal adds further complexity. As a major trade hub, the city had connections to distant regions, including Mesopotamia. Archaeologists speculate that unusual burials may reflect ritual practices tied to social, political, or economic stress, perhaps sacrifices intended to appease deities or ensure the success of maritime trade. Unlike the grand tombs of Egypt or the royal kurgans of Siberia, these acts, if sacrificial, would have been integrated into civic life rather than elite burial rites. Excavations at other Indus sites, such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, show generally peaceful and uniform burial practices, supporting the view that human sacrifice was not a widespread phenomenon in the civilization. Yet Lothal remains an outlier, prompting continuing debate. Archaeologists have emphasized that the evidence is circumstantial, relying on skeletal trauma, burial patterns, and contextual analysis. Without textual records, definitive conclusions remain elusive, highlighting both the sophistication and the mystery of the Indus Valley civilization. The debate over possible human sacrifice also touches on social structure and cosmology. If sacrifices occurred, they may have been associated with elite rituals, protection of the city, or religious observances aimed at controlling natural forces such as floods or droughts. These practices could reflect a belief system in which human life was intimately connected to divine favor and the stability of society. Even without concrete evidence, the anomalies at Lothal demonstrate that ritualized human death was a consideration in some contexts, echoing global patterns observed in other civilizations. Modern forensic methods continue to shed light on these mysteries. CT scans, isotopic studies, and DNA testing allow researchers to reconstruct individual life histories, determine familial or regional origins, and examine trauma patterns with unprecedented precision. These techniques confirm that some burials were unusual in terms of demographics, positioning, or injuries, supporting the hypothesis that ritual killing, while not widespread, was a plausible practice in select contexts. It is also important to consider the broader archaeological context. Indus Valley society was highly urbanized with well-planned streets, water systems, and trade networks. Any practice involving human sacrifice would have been a carefully controlled ritual, possibly reserved for extraordinary circumstances such as royal ceremonies, epidemics, or civic crises. Unlike Mesopotamia, China, or Peru, where large-scale sacrifices were integral to elite burial, the Indus Valley evidence suggests localized or exceptional ritual activity, making interpretation challenging but intriguing. The Lothal and Indus Valley debates remind us that not all evidence is clear-cut. Archaeology often deals with fragments, anomalies, and traces of behaviour that must be interpreted cautiously. These sites challenge us to consider cultural variation, social norms, and ritual intent, recognizing that human sacrifice was not uniform across all civilizations, but manifested in ways appropriate to local belief systems and social structures. Despite uncertainties, these anomalies connect the Indus Valley to the broader pattern of human sacrifice in the ancient world. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, China to Mesoamerica, Peru to Siberia, the underlying themes are consistent: power, devotion, hierarchy, and the preparation for an afterlife or spiritual order. Lothal may represent a subtler, more enigmatic manifestation of the same impulse, a reminder that ritualized death was a global phenomenon, expressed in diverse forms and contexts. As we leave Lothal and the Indus Valley, we are confronted with the limits of our knowledge. Some mysteries may never be fully solved, but the evidence encourages continued inquiry and reflection. Human sacrifice, whether widespread or isolated, serves as a lens through which we can explore ancient beliefs about death, duty, hierarchy, and the afterlife. The debates themselves reveal the richness and complexity of archaeology, demonstrating that even in the absence of certainty, these practices illuminate the spiritual, social, and political fabric of ancient civilizations. Throughout human history, one of the most striking and unsettling aspects of ancient civilizations is the extent to which people were willing to sacrifice human lives to protect and honor their rulers in death. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, China, Peru, and Mesoamerica, archaeologists have uncovered repeated patterns. Attendants, servants, warriors, and even family members were killed or buried alongside kings, queens, and elite rulers. These acts were not random, but rooted in deeply held beliefs about the afterlife, spiritual guardianship, and social order. Chapter 11 explores the underlying philosophy that justified these acts, drawing together evidence from multiple cultures and connecting ritual, devotion, and fear in a broader human context. The concept of afterlife protection stems from the belief that rulers retain their power and influence after death. In Mesopotamia, as seen in the royal tombs of attendants were killed to serve their queen in the next world. Sir Leonard Woolley's excavations revealed 74 individuals buried with Queen Puabi, many showing signs of poison or strangulation. These deaths were framed as acts of service rather than violence, ensuring that the queen's needs in the afterlife would be met, maintaining the structure and comfort she enjoyed in life. Human sacrifice in this context was a spiritual extension of social hierarchy. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, early pharaohs were accompanied by retainer sacrifices. Excavations at Abydos by David O'Connor revealed dozens of servants buried with pharaohs, many showing evidence of strangulation or controlled killing. These sacrifices were believed to protect the king's journey into the afterlife, ensuring that the ruler was surrounded by loyal attendants, ready to serve in the spiritual realm. The Egyptians viewed death not as an end, but as a continuation of earthly responsibilities, where status, duty, and ritual obligations persisted beyond the grave. In China, during the Shang and early Zhou dynasties, human sacrifice was also closely tied to the philosophy of afterlife protection. The tomb of Lady Fu Hao, excavated in Anyang, contained multiple human victims and even animals, arranged strategically to accompany the queen. Skeletons from these tombs show evidence of ritual killing, often executed with precision. The Zhou dynasty continued this practice, positioning attendants, horses, and chariots around the deceased. These sacrifices were intended to guard the ruler's spiritual domain, serving as companions, protectors, and extensions of the ruler's earthly power. In the Chinese worldview, maintaining cosmic balance and ensuring the deceased's authority in the afterlife were paramount. In Peru, the Moche and Wari civilizations followed similar patterns. At Huaca de la Luna, rows of sacrificed warriors were discovered, their throats cut in ritualized ceremonies to honor elite rulers. At the Wari Tomb of the Queens, young women were buried alongside elite female rulers, carefully arranged to serve and protect them in the afterlife. In these societies, human life was considered an offering that reinforced both spiritual and political authority, ensuring the deceased's continuity of power and the stability of society itself. The underlying rationale across these civilizations can be summarized in several key philosophical and ritual principles: continuity of status and service. The afterlife was viewed as a mirror of earthly life. Just as kings, queens, and elites required attendance, protection, and resources in life, they were believed to need the same in death. Sacrificed individuals were seen as continuing their service beyond mortality. Spiritual guardianship. Sacrifices were meant to protect the deceased from spiritual threats, malevolent forces, or rivals in the afterlife. In Mesopotamia, China, and Egypt, the presence of attendants or guardians symbolically and spiritually ensured the ruler's dominance and security. Ritual purification and obedience. Sacrificial acts were carefully structured, adhering to ceremonial rules. Binding victims, positioning them precisely, and performing ritual executions ensured that the act was not random violence, but a sacred duty, performed in accordance with divine laws and societal expectations. Honor and devotion. In many cultures, sacrifice was framed as an honor rather than punishment. Attendants, servants, and warriors were considered privileged to accompany a ruler, reinforcing social and spiritual hierarchies. In this worldview, death for the ruler's service was a demonstration of ultimate loyalty, maintenance of cosmic balance. Many ancient civilizations believed that the world's stability depended on human offerings. The deaths of servants, warriors, or attendants were not solely about protecting rulers, but also about ensuring the continuity of society, agriculture, and the natural order. Blood, life force, and devotion were spiritual currencies essential for harmony in both earthly and spiritual realms. Archaeological evidence supports these philosophical interpretations. At attendants were found with ceremonial objects, golden helmets, and musical instruments, suggesting preparation for specific roles in the afterlife. At Lady Fu Hao's tomb, victims were carefully arranged with weapons and jade, emphasizing ritual intent. At the sacred cenote of Chichen Itza, human remains were accompanied by offerings to the rain god Chak, reflecting the connection between sacrifice, divine favor, and societal survival. Modern forensic techniques have allowed archaeologists to analyze trauma patterns, chemical residues, and isotopic signatures, revealing not only how individuals were killed, but also how they were selected and prepared for ritual death. CT scans show evidence of controlled execution, while DNA analysis sometimes indicates familial or regional origins, suggesting that choices of sacrificial victims were deliberate and socially meaningful. These methods underscore the idea that sacrifice was never random, but governed by a philosophy linking hierarchy, duty, and spiritual necessity. It is also important to recognize the psychological and social dimensions of these practices. Witnessing ritual sacrifice reinforced social order, reminding the community of elite authority, divine favor, and the consequences of defying societal norms. In some civilizations, mass sacrifices, like those of the Moche or Shang Dynasty, created public spectacle, connecting political power with spiritual devotion and social compliance. Sacrifice thus served as both a spiritual and political tool. Despite the universality of this practice, cultural variations are evident. In China and Mesopotamia, human sacrifice often accompanied elite tombs, integrated with chariots, horses, and elaborate grave goods. In Peru and Mesoamerica, sacrifices could include large groups of attendants or captives, sometimes performed in communal ceremonies tied to agriculture or divine appeasement. In Egypt, the focus was often on pharaohs and their closest attendants. Yet, in all cases, the philosophical motivation remained consistent: to protect, honor, and empower the deceased in the afterlife while reinforcing social and spiritual hierarchies in life. The dark philosophy of afterlife protection reveals the intersection of devotion, fear, and power. Ancient rulers commanded ultimate authority over life and death, justified by religious and cosmological beliefs. The willingness to sacrifice human lives reflects the deep conviction that spiritual well-being, social order, and elite continuity required extreme acts of devotion. While modern sensibilities recoil at these practices, understanding their rationale allows us to see the logic, ritual, and cultural coherence behind them. As we conclude this chapter, it becomes clear that human sacrifice was not a series of random acts of cruelty, but a systematic, philosophical, and socially sanctioned practice. Across continents and centuries, rulers relied on human lives to assert authority, secure protection, and maintain cosmic balance. By studying these patterns, we gain insight not only into ancient beliefs, but also into the human capacity to intertwine devotion, hierarchy, and mortality in ways that shaped civilizations for millennia. The study of ancient human sacrifices has been revolutionized by modern forensic science, where early archaeologists could only speculate about the methods, motives, and identities of sacrificial victims. Today's tools allow researchers to reconstruct lives, deaths, and rituals with extraordinary precision. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, China, Peru and Mesoamerica, CT scans, bone trauma analysis, DNA testing, isotopic studies and chemical residue analysis have transformed our understanding of the past, shedding light on practices that were once shrouded in mystery. This chapter explores how these techniques illuminate the grim realities of human sacrifice and royal burials. One of the most critical tools in modern analysis is the CT scan. High-resolution imaging allows archaeologists to examine skeletal remains without physically disturbing fragile bones. For example, in the tombs of CT scans of attendant skulls reveal evidence of perimortem trauma, including fractures consistent with blunt force or strangulation, confirming Woolley's original observations. Scans also show postural arrangements in the burial, helping researchers understand ritual positioning and the spatial logic behind sacrificial placement. Similarly, scans of Shang Dynasty tombs in Anyang show victims placed precisely around chariots or beds, with trauma patterns consistent with ceremonial execution. Bone trauma analysis is another cornerstone of forensic study. By examining cut marks, fractures, and other injuries on skeletons, archaeologists can determine the method, force, and intent of the killing. In Moche tombs at Huaca de la Luna, researchers have documented sharp cut marks along the throat, indicating ritualized throat cutting. The clean, deliberate nature of these cuts suggests skilled execution rather than chaotic violence. In Wari tombs, bone trauma confirms that young female attendants were likely restrained and killed in controlled ceremonies, reflecting ritual precision and hierarchical obedience. DNA analysis has opened a window into the identities, relationships, and origins of sacrificial victims. In Mesopotamian tombs, DNA testing can reveal familial ties between attendants or connections to local populations, helping researchers understand selection criteria for sacrifice. Were victims chosen from elite households, or were they captives from other regions? In the Moche and Wari cultures, DNA studies have revealed that some sacrificed individuals were likely from distant areas, possibly brought in as tribute or captives, highlighting the political and social dimensions of ritual killing. Isotopic studies further expand our understanding by revealing diet, geographic origin, and even migration patterns of ancient peoples. Analysis of carbon and nitrogen isotopes in bones can indicate whether a victim grew up locally or elsewhere. For example, isotopic studies of Shang Dynasty victims show that some individuals consume diets distinct from the local elite, suggesting that sacrificial victims may have been captives or outsiders, reinforcing their symbolic role in ritual hierarchies. Similarly, isotopic analysis of Moche victims confirms that many were coastal or valley locals, carefully selected for ceremonial purposes. Chemical residue analysis adds yet another layer of insight. Traces of poisons, pigments, or ritual substances on bones or grave goods can reveal methods of killing or ceremonial practices. In some attendants' remains show chemical residues consistent with ingestion of toxic substances, supporting Woolley's hypothesis of poison use in ritual sacrifice. In other cultures, traces of pigments or plant-based compounds suggest ceremonial preparation, perhaps including anointing victims, marking them, or performing ritual purification before execution. Modern forensics also illuminates demographic patterns among sacrificial victims. Age, sex, and physical condition are often indicators of selection criteria. Many civilizations preferred young adults in their physical prime, whether warriors, attendants, or servants. In Wari tombs, the sacrificed women were young, likely chosen for their vitality and ability to serve in the afterlife. Similarly, in Hueca de la Luna, robust warriors were preferred, reflecting symbolic and practical considerations. Understanding these patterns helps researchers reconstruct social hierarchies, ritual logic, and cultural priorities. Spatial analysis of burial sites, aided by modern surveying technology, reveals the organization and structure of ritual spaces. At Huaca de la Luna, layers of sacrificed warriors indicate repeated ceremonies, each carefully aligned and arranged to maximize ceremonial effect. In Shang tombs, the placement of victims around chariots and beds suggests a cosmological logic, aligning the deceased, attendants, and objects to mirror the world of the living in miniature, ensuring spiritual protection and social order in death. Beyond physical analysis, modern forensics contributes to understanding cultural meaning. By combining skeletal evidence, chemical data, and spatial arrangement, researchers can interpret the symbolic role of victims. Were they guardians, companions, or offerings to the divine? Were sacrifices intended to protect the ruler, appease gods, or reinforce social hierarchy? These questions are answered by meticulous forensic study, providing a multidimensional reconstruction of ancient ritual practices. Forensic science has also shed light on the evolution of sacrificial practices over time. In China, analysis of Shang Dynasty tombs shows a gradual decline in human sacrifice, replaced by symbolic figures or less violent offerings. This transition is documented through skeletal studies and chemical analysis, demonstrating that while rituals persisted, the methods and intensity of killing evolved in response to ethical, religious, and political changes. Similarly, in Egypt, early retainer sacrifices eventually gave way to symbolic figurines and tomb goods, reflecting shifts in belief systems. The combination of these techniques allows modern archaeologists to approach ancient human sacrifice with precision and empathy. They reveal not only the mechanics of killing, but also the social, spiritual, and political context, showing that victims were part of a larger cosmological and hierarchical system. Understanding trauma patterns, preparation methods, and material culture allows researchers to reconstruct rituals as lived experiences rather than abstract theories. Importantly, modern forensic analysis bridges archaeology with ethical reflection. By examining the human cost of ritualized death, scientists confront the reality of ancient power structures, devotion, and belief. These studies illuminate how societies justified extreme acts, revealing the intricate interplay of religion, politics, and social hierarchy that underpinned human sacrifice across continents and cultures. In summary, modern forensic analysis transforms the study of ancient sacrificial practices. Through CT scans, bone trauma studies, DNA and isotopic analysis, and chemical residue testing, archaeologists gain unparalleled insight into the lives and deaths of victims, the logic of ritual practice, and the beliefs that motivated these acts. From Mesopotamia to Peru, from China to Mesoamerica, The application of scientific tools allows us to connect material evidence with human experience, deepening our understanding of power, devotion, and mortality in ancient civilizations. As we leave the laboratory and the excavation site, we can now hear the voices of the dead themselves through inscriptions, hymns, and oracle bones, providing a final, haunting connection between the living and those who served in life and death. In the next chapter, we will explore these voices from the dead, bringing the human, spiritual, and emotional dimensions of ancient sacrifice vividly to life. Archaeology often allows us to reconstruct events, rituals, and societies, but occasionally it offers something far more intimate. A direct glimpse into the voices of the people who lived and died in these ancient worlds. In royal tombs and sacrificial contexts, these voices emerge not from flesh and bone alone, but from inscriptions, carvings, oracle bones, and death hymns, artifacts that reveal the beliefs, prayers, and fears of those who inhabited these civilizations. Chapter 13 explores how these sources allow us to hear the dead speaking across millennia, giving insight into the human experience of life, death, and ritual sacrifice. In Mesopotamia, the royal tombs of Ur are not only remarkable for the sheer number of sacrificial attendants, but also for the inscribed artifacts found within them. Cylinder seals, clay tablets, and carved plaques bear images and symbols reflecting religious beliefs, social hierarchy, and funerary practices. Some inscriptions depict attendants leading the queen into the afterlife, carrying objects, or performing ceremonial duties. Although these records are stylized and symbolic, they convey a narrative of service, devotion, and continuity, illustrating how the living sought to ensure the dead remained surrounded by care, protection, and authority. Mesopotamian death hymns are another remarkable resource. These texts, often written in Sumerian or Akkadian, were intended to accompany the deceased in the afterlife. Some describe the journey of the soul, the roles of servants and guardians, and the obligations of the living to perform proper funerary rites. Archaeologists and linguists have translated portions of these hymns, revealing phrases like, "May the attendants guide you through the underworld," or "The queen is honoured with service eternal." Such texts provide not only ritual context but also emotional insight, suggesting that sacrifice was framed as an act of sacred duty, honour, and cosmic necessity. In ancient Egypt, the dead spoke through the Book of the Dead, funerary spells, and inscriptions on tomb walls. Pharaohs and elite individuals were accompanied by attendants who were expected to continue service in the afterlife. The spells often include instructions for navigating the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, providing protection against demons, and ensuring access to food, water, and ritual offerings. At Abydos, inscriptions found near sacrificial burials emphasize the connection between the pharaoh and his retainers, framing the deaths of servants as necessary for the pharaoh's spiritual well-being. Archaeologists have interpreted these texts as the dead speaking indirectly, guiding both the living and the deceased through the cosmic order. In China, oracle bones from the Shang Dynasty, often used for divination, contain references to royal burials and sacrificial practices. These inscriptions document decisions about who would be sacrificed, the timing of rituals, and the desired outcomes for the deceased ruler. For example, inscriptions might record a king asking whether attendants should accompany him in death, or whether captives should be sacrificed to appease ancestral spirits. These bones, sometimes burned to produce cracks that were interpreted by diviners, act as the voice of the past, providing both practical and spiritual insight into the decision-making behind human sacrifice. The tomb of Lady Fu Hao in Anyang further illustrates the voices of the dead through ceremonial objects and inscriptions. Jade, weapons, and ritual implements often bear markings identifying the role of attendants, the deity being honoured, or the purpose of the sacrifice. These objects, combined with the positioning of the victims, allow researchers to reconstruct ritual narratives, imagining the sequence of events as attendants were placed, offerings made, and the tomb sealed. The dead speak through these artifacts, telling a story of devotion, hierarchy, and ritualized duty that transcends millennia. In Mesoamerica, the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza in Mexico contains both human remains and offerings that act as voices of the dead. Archaeologist Edward Thompson documented numerous artifacts accompanying human victims, including jewelry, ceramics, and figurines. These offerings often bear symbols invoking the rain god Chak, demonstrating that sacrifice was intertwined with religious belief and environmental concern. Victims' placement within the cenote, combined with ritual objects, communicates their role in appeasing deities and maintaining cosmic order, creating a silent but powerful narrative from the past. In Peru, the Moche and Wari civilizations provide additional evidence of voices from the dead. At Huaca de la Luna, rows of sacrificed warriors are positioned with ceremonial objects, and Wari tombs include intricate textiles and jewelry. These artifacts act as extensions of the deceased, telling a story about social roles, hierarchy, and devotion. In the Wari Tomb of the Queens, women sacrificed to accompany elite rulers are surrounded by grave goods that communicate their duties in the afterlife, allowing us to hear their intended purpose through material culture. Modern archaeology amplifies these voices through forensic, chemical, and isotopic analysis. By reconstructing age, health, geographic origin, and trauma, researchers gain a sense of individual lives. Were the victims captives or loyal attendants? Were they prepared ceremonially or forced abruptly into sacrifice? These data points combine with inscriptions and grave goods to create a multi-dimensional narrative. The dead, through their remains and artifacts, speak to us of obedience, devotion, and ritualized power, revealing the emotional and spiritual context of human sacrifice. In addition to individual voices, the dead speak collectively through patterns. Mass burials, repeated sacrificial events, and uniform placement of victims across sites indicate that ritualized killing was culturally codified. The arrangement of bodies, the selection of victims, and the inclusion of objects and inscriptions communicate societal priorities, ensuring afterlife protection, maintaining social hierarchy, and fulfilling spiritual obligations. These patterns allow modern researchers to hear not just one voice, but the chorus of a civilization echoing across time. The voices of the dead also highlight the moral and emotional complexity of sacrifice. Inscriptions, hymns, and artifacts frame these acts as honourable, sacred, and necessary, suggesting that both the living and the dead believed in the righteousness of ritual killing. The human experience of sacrifice, fear, devotion, duty, and hierarchy resonates through these artifacts, reminding us that ancient societies integrated mortality into their cosmology, politics, and spiritual worldview. Even in cases where inscriptions are absent, material culture allows the dead to speak. The positioning of victims in Ur, Anyang, or Peru communicates intent, status, and ritual function. Grave goods, textiles, and ceremonial implements convey meaning, providing a silent narrative of obligation and cosmic order. These objects are proxies for voice, offering insight into rituals, beliefs, and societal structures that words alone cannot capture. Ultimately, the voices from the dead reveal the human dimension of ancient sacrifice. They remind us that these practices were embedded in complex belief systems, not merely acts of cruelty. Attendants, warriors, and captives played essential roles in maintaining spiritual, political, and social continuity. Through inscriptions, oracle bones, hymns, and artifacts, the dead communicate their service, their placement, and the profound cultural significance of their deaths. As we conclude this chapter, it becomes clear that archaeology is not just about bones and tombs, but about listening to the past, interpreting the messages left behind by those who lived, served, and died in ancient civilizations. These voices enrich our understanding of ritual, devotion, and hierarchy, connecting us to the human experience across millennia. Human sacrifice, though pervasive across ancient civilizations, did not endure indefinitely. By examining the archaeological record, historical texts, and socio-cultural transformations, we can trace how and why these extreme practices gradually ceased. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, China, Mesoamerica, and Peru, societies evolved, abandoning, or at least reducing, the ritualized killing of attendants, warriors, or captives in royal burials. Chapter 14 explores the complex interplay of religious, political, ethical, and social factors that led to this dramatic transformation in human behavior. One of the most important factors was the rise of new religious ideas. In Mesopotamia, the early Sumerian practice of retainer sacrifice gradually gave way to symbolic rituals, often represented by figurines rather than living attendants. This transition coincided with evolving theological perspectives that emphasized moral virtue, cosmic justice, or ritual substitution. By the time of the Old Babylonian period, we observe fewer instances of human sacrifice, suggesting that shifts in religious doctrine created ethical constraints that discouraged actual killings. In ancient Egypt, the death of retainer sacrifice is similarly linked to religious innovation. Early dynastic tombs included attendants killed to accompany pharaohs, but by the end of the first intermediate period, these practices had largely ceased. The development of the Book of the Dead, along with complex funerary rituals involving spells, offerings, and symbolic objects, provided a substitute for human victims. Clay figurines, food offerings, and ritual depictions of servants allowed the deceased pharaohs to be served in the afterlife without the ethical and social cost of real human sacrifice. The Egyptians thus achieved a balance, maintaining ritual continuity while responding to emerging moral and social expectations. In China, human sacrifice persisted well into the Shang Dynasty, but declined during the Zhou period. Archaeological evidence shows that early Zhou tombs continued the practice, but over time symbolic representations replaced actual killings. Confucian philosophy, emerging around the late Zhou period, emphasized ethical governance, benevolence, and the humane treatment of subjects, creating moral and social pressure against ritualized execution. Sacrifice gradually shifted from literal attendance to symbolic offerings, reflecting a profound cultural shift, the recognition that spiritual continuity could be maintained without violating human life. Legal reforms and centralized governance also contributed to the decline of human sacrifice. In many civilizations, rulers increasingly codified laws that prohibited or restricted ritual killings. In Mesopotamia, for example, legal codes began to define the treatment of servants and captives, limiting elite authority over life and death. In China, the codification of Zhou laws reinforced societal order, reducing arbitrary execution and encouraging ritual substitution. By regulating social and spiritual behavior, these legal frameworks created a structure in which human sacrifice became less necessary and socially unacceptable. Social revolts and resistance played a significant role as well. In societies where human sacrifice persisted, evidence suggests that communities occasionally resisted, either passively or actively. In Mesoamerica, some accounts hint that captives or lower status individuals were occasionally protected or hidden, demonstrating that the morality of sacrifice was contested even among contemporaries. In Egypt and China, social change and the increasing power of bureaucracies limited the ability of elites to demand human lives, reinforcing ethical and practical constraints on ritual killing. Economic and practical considerations also influenced the decline of sacrifice. Maintaining an economy in which young adults or skilled attendants could be killed for ritual purposes was costly and disruptive. In Mesopotamia, killing large numbers of retainers for royal burials was feasible during early dynastic periods, but became increasingly impractical as urban populations grew and labor became more valuable. Similarly, in Moche and Wari cultures, sacrificial practices were costly, requiring organized capture, preparation, and execution, making symbolic alternatives more appealing over time. Ethical evolution played a subtle but essential role. Across civilizations, humans gradually developed a growing awareness of the value of life, empathy, and moral responsibility. While early societies framed sacrifice as honor, devotion, and cosmic necessity, over time, ethical reasoning began to challenge the legitimacy of ritual killing, particularly as symbolic alternatives emerged. Philosophers, priests, and rulers promoted substitutes, figurines, inscriptions, or ritual objects that maintained religious function while eliminating human cost. Archaeological evidence reflects these changes. In Egypt, later dynastic tombs no longer contain human attendants, but clay shabti figures take their place. In China, Zhou tombs eventually replaced live retainers with symbolic representations. In Mesopotamia, retainer burials disappeared, replaced by ceremonial objects, inscriptions, and offerings. In Mesoamerica and Peru, the scale of ritual killing declined, with evidence of symbolic or occasional sacrifices rather than mass executions. Across all cultures, substitution, moral reflection, and social control converged to end the widespread practice of human sacrifice. Another factor was the integration of new philosophical frameworks that emphasized moral and social responsibility. Confucianism in China, for example, promoted benevolence and humane governance. Similarly, the evolution of Egyptian religious thought emphasized the moral obligations of rulers toward their subjects, framing human life as sacred while maintaining spiritual order through symbolic rituals. These intellectual movements provided ideological support for abandoning actual sacrifice, aligning moral evolution with ritual continuity. Environmental and societal changes also influenced practice. In some cultures, climate stress, population growth, or shifts in agriculture required a more sustainable approach to human resources. Sacrificial practices that once reinforced social hierarchy or spiritual authority became unsustainable or undesirable, leading societies to adapt ritual forms that preserved religious meaning without human cost. By the end of the ancient period, the cumulative impact of religious innovation, legal codification, social evolution, ethical reasoning, and economic practicality resulted in the near-complete cessation of large-scale human sacrifice in many civilizations. Royal tombs transitioned from sites of ritualized killing to spaces marked by symbolic offerings, artistic expression, and ceremonial performance. The practice did not vanish overnight, but evolved gradually, reflecting the dynamic interaction between belief, authority, and morality. The archaeological record, combined with historical texts and forensic evidence, allows us to understand this transition not as a moralistic judgment, but as a complex cultural evolution. Societies found ways to maintain spiritual continuity, reinforce hierarchy, and honor the dead without committing acts that modern sensibilities, and increasingly ancient ones, would consider morally unacceptable. In reflecting on why these practices stopped, it becomes clear that human sacrifice was never merely a religious act. It was a social, political, and ethical phenomenon. Its decline represents a profound shift in human consciousness, the recognition that power and devotion could coexist with respect for human life, that symbolic acts could replace deadly rituals, and that the dead could be honored without demanding the living's ultimate sacrifice. As we close this chapter, we see that the end of human sacrifice marks not only the cessation of ritual killing, but also a broader cultural, ethical, and philosophical transformation. Ancient societies discovered alternatives to violence, integrating symbolic offerings, ceremonial objects, and inscriptions to honor the dead, while preserving moral and social order. This evolution provides a window into the capacity of human civilizations to adapt, reflect, and innovate in response to moral, social, and practical pressures. As we reach the conclusion of this journey through the tombs, temples, and sacrificial sites of the ancient world, we are confronted with both awe and horror. From the royal tombs of in Mesopotamia to the Moche chambers of Peru, from the retainer burials of Egypt to the sacrificial pits of the Shang Dynasty, the archaeological record tells a story of human devotion, fear, power, and ritual cruelty. These practices were not isolated incidents. They were systematic, culturally ingrained, and deeply intertwined with spiritual, political, and social structures. In this final chapter, we reflect on the lessons these tombs teach us about humanity's past, the nature of power, and the enduring human confrontation with mortality. First and foremost, these ancient practices reveal the human fear of death. Across cultures, rulers and elites sought to control the unknown, ensuring that their status, comfort, and influence continued beyond life. Human sacrifice, whether through attendants, warriors, or captives, was a tangible method of mitigating the uncertainty of the afterlife. Archaeological evidence from the 74 attendants buried with Queen Puabi at Ur to the rows of warriors at Huasa de la Luna demonstrates that societies believed the dead required ongoing service, protection, and devotion. These rituals reflect a universal desire to bridge life and death, to impose order on what was otherwise uncontrollable and terrifying. Closely tied to this fear is the power of rulers. Human sacrifice was often an extension of political authority, reinforcing hierarchies and social control. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, only the most elite had the right to command such extreme devotion, a stark reminder of the intertwining of political and spiritual power. The tombs themselves were symbols, monumental expressions of authority that communicated the ruler's dominion over life, death, and the afterlife. The sacrifices were both practical and symbolic. Attendants ensured the ruler's afterlife needs were met, and the act itself asserted the ruler's unchallenged supremacy over their subjects. Yet, these practices also illuminate the complex psychology of ritual cruelty. While modern sensibilities may view human sacrifice as barbaric, within the cultural and spiritual frameworks of these civilizations, such acts were justified, sacred, and morally coherent. Attendants, warriors, and servants were often considered privileged to participate, viewed as offering honor and devotion in exchange for eternal service in the afterlife. Archaeological evidence, placement of bodies, accompanying grave goods or inscriptions and ceremonial objects demonstrates that killing was ritualized, deliberate, and bound by spiritual and social rules. It was cruelty shaped and constrained by cultural logic, reflecting a worldview in which death was instrumental, meaningful, and socially sanctioned. The archaeological record provides not only evidence of these practices, but also insight into their philosophical and spiritual dimensions. In China, the Shang Dynasty tombs reveal a meticulous arrangement of attendants, chariots, and horses, reflecting cosmological beliefs and the desire for continuity in death. In Egypt, retainer sacrifices align with the pharaoh's spiritual journey, guided by the Book of the Dead and funerary spells. In Mesoamerica, offerings to the rain god Chak in Chichen Itza illustrate the connection between human life, divine favor, and societal well-being. Across all these cultures, human sacrifice functioned as a bridge between worlds, a tool for navigating the spiritual, social, and political spheres simultaneously. Modern forensic and archaeological analysis deepens our understanding of these practices. CT scans, isotopic studies, DNA analysis, and chemical residue testing allow researchers to reconstruct not only how individuals were killed, but also their origins, social status, and role within the ritual. Through these techniques, we see the deliberate choices made by ancient societies, selecting young, strong, or loyal individuals, arranging them carefully around the deceased, and combining their deaths with symbolic objects to ensure spiritual efficacy. The dead, through their remains, inscriptions, and grave goods, continue to communicate across millennia, revealing both the human cost and the social logic of ritualized sacrifice. At the same time, the decline of human sacrifice highlights the adaptive capacity of human societies. Religious innovation, legal reforms, philosophical thought, and social evolution gradually replaced ritual killing with symbolic alternatives. Shabti figures in Egypt, oracle inscriptions and figurines in China, and ceremonial objects in Peru provided spiritual continuity without human cost. This transition illustrates a profound shift in moral consciousness. Humans learn to honor the dead, maintain spiritual order, and assert social hierarchy while reducing violence and preserving life. Archaeology thus reveals not only the capacity for cruelty, but also the capacity for moral and cultural evolution. Moreover, these tombs and sacrificial sites illuminate the shared threads of human experience across time and geography. Despite differences in culture, geography, and technology, societies consistently grappled with the same questions. How do we honor the dead? How do we ensure the stability of society and the favor of gods? How do we reconcile devotion, fear, and mortality? From Mesopotamia to Peru, the answers converged on ritualized acts, sometimes extreme, that reinforced hierarchy, maintained cosmic order, and connected the living with the spiritual world. In reflecting on these patterns, it becomes clear that archaeology is not merely the study of objects, but the study of human thought, belief, and action. Royal tombs, sacrificial pits, and ceremonial sites are windows into the values, fears, and priorities of ancient people. They reveal a world in which loyalty, obedience, and devotion were intertwined with mortality, where rulers commanded absolute authority over life and death, and where spiritual belief justified acts that today seem incomprehensible. These sites teach us about human creativity, organization, and the lengths to which societies will go to negotiate the unknown. Yet, there is also a cautionary lesson. The human impulse to control, dominate, and ritualize life and death, while understandable in its historical context, serves as a reminder of the ethical responsibilities that accompany power. Modern reflection allows us to appreciate the complex social, political, and spiritual motivations behind these acts without condoning them, highlighting the capacity for both cruelty and moral reflection in human history. Ultimately, these tombs teach us about the resilience and adaptability of human culture. Societies confronted mortality, hierarchy, and spiritual uncertainty, developing elaborate rituals to manage fear, assert authority, and maintain cosmic balance. Over time, they evolved morally, ethically, and socially, finding alternatives to sacrifice while preserving the symbolic and spiritual essence of their practices. In this way, the study of ancient tombs and sacrifices connects us to the deepest questions of human existence, the meaning of life, the inevitability of death, and the ways we seek continuity beyond mortality. As we conclude our journey through the tombs of terror, we are left with a nuanced understanding of humanity. We see the power of belief, the reach of authority, the consequences of devotion, and the evolution of morality. Archaeology, combined with modern forensic science and historical analysis, allows us to hear the voices of the past, witness the rituals of life and death, and reflect on the shared concerns that have shaped human civilization for millennia. The story of human sacrifice is both dark and illuminating. It reminds us that fear, devotion, and power are universal, that ritual and morality are culturally constructed, and that societies are capable of both extraordinary cruelty and profound ethical evolution. By studying these tombs, we learn not only about the past, but also about the enduring questions that define humanity. How do we confront death? How do we honor life? How do we balance devotion, authority, and morality? In the silence of the tombs, among the bones, inscriptions, and artifacts, the dead continue to speak. They tell us their story, not as a tale of simple cruelty, but as a complex narrative of human belief, social order, spiritual aspiration, and the eternal quest to reconcile life and death. And it is through listening, understanding, and reflecting that we honor both their lives and the lessons they leave behind.